Esther Winchester is a pretty tricky boss if you're not confident with your abilities to do certain things, like positioning and parrying. However, with this guide, you will start to realize what things you're doing wrong and how to correct those mistakes, as well as know what strategies you can utilize to make this as easy as possible for you. Since this is a plain level, the only thing that matters from your loadout is your charm, and as always, Divine Relic is going to be your best bet. I would argue that using Divine Relic for Esther is way better than most of the other plain bosses because you will really be utilizing all of the charm effects to their fullest capabilities. If you don't have Divine Relic, I would strongly advise you go out of your way to get the Divine Relic, and I will possibly make a guide soon on how to get Divine Relic because it is that important for S-ranking plain bosses. Other charms that would be helpful here are Smoke Bomb to dodge all the different kinds of obstacles, or Coffee to consistently spam supers or EXs. With all of that, let's get into the boss fight. The first phase is quite a doozy, but rest assured you can get past this phase quite fast once you understand how to best position yourself, because positioning is everything with this boss, at least in my opinion. One of her first attacks she'll do is shoot 2 snake oil pellets, which go forward shortly before curving upwards towards the right side of the screen, then bouncing towards the left side. Their preset path is to fly above and below the player, meaning it's fairly easy to dodge them by just going in between them. Now is a good time to mention that depending on whether her head is peeking out of the bottom or top floor of the saloon, her attacks will take up different areas of the screen, and you'll be reacting differently to each of her attacks. If she's on the top floor, simply stay farther back and stay in the middle of the 2 shots like I mentioned earlier, and they'll completely miss you. If she's on the bottom half, however, it gets a bit more tricky. If you're near the middle of the screen when the oil pellets curve up, you'll most likely get hit, which is not great. Sometimes even, when the shots bounce towards the left, if you move too much, you might run into them by accident. You can either pay attention to where the oil pellets land and then position yourself in the middle of the 2, while the minions are still trying to hit you of course, or you can just move downwards so you can use the same procedure as if Esther was on the top floor shooting oil pellets. The problem with this is the dynamite from the vulture. If the vulture throws the dynamite down while you're on the bottom half of the screen, you'll be heavily at risk of taking a hit. This means you'll probably have to do both methods occasionally for your S-rank attempts. She can also rope in a huge cactus that takes up the half of the screen she is currently on. Now, if she ropes in the cactus while on the bottom floor, then simply stay in the upper half and drop bombs to deal damage. If she's on the top floor, you can actually hide here at the top of the screen right next to the saloon. You'll typically be fine here, dropping bombs to deal some damage, but you still want to leave this area as soon as you can to not potentially get hit by stray projectiles. If the vulture comes by right as you're in this corner, you can shrink and move tightly into that corner and the vulture won't hit you. Although this strategy typically works out well from my experience, you can still decide to just move to the lower part of the screen and not deal damage to play it safe. Since the time requirement is not a problem for this boss, this will be just fine. Just keep your guard up and dodge any projectiles that come towards you. So those are the 2 attacks Esther can do herself. There are also 2 minions that you'll need to pay attention to. First is the small flying horse that shoots the spiky cactus ball at you, which all you need to do is pay attention to when they shoot and dodge or parry it. The flying horse will always travel from the right to the left side of the screen, stop, shoot the cactus ball, then leave. You can also shoot or whetstone the flying horse to get rid of it. Then there is the vulture like I mentioned earlier that drops the dynamite, and when it hits the ground, it splits into a wave of 3 small dynamite, then 2. This attack used to get me a lot, so just be careful and pay attention to dodge the dynamite. So that's everything that happens during the first phase. It's surprisingly not that much, but with everything together and how often the minions come in, this phase can be a lot to handle. But like I mentioned earlier, positioning is everything, and you want to know why? Because believe it or not, you can get past this phase while almost never moving vertically. Don't believe me? Here you can see our multiple times where I only moved horizontally to dodge projectiles, and I easily beat this phase like it was nothing. So how do you do this too? Well, the key is where you decide to position yourself, and some RNG. I found out that if you just move a little up and to the right when the fight starts, that's really all you'll have to move vertically to get past this first phase. You use Pea Shooter when she's on the top floor, and bombs when she's on the bottom floor. The oil pellets will miss you naturally, and simply staying farther back will prevent when she's on the bottom floor and the oil pellets curve upwards towards you. You can whetstone the horse to get rid of it like I mentioned earlier, and all you have to worry about from then on is moving horizontally for the dynamite. The only time you'll ever have to move significantly is when Esther goes in to rope the cactus while she's on the top floor, and simply doing the trick I mentioned earlier completely bypasses this. And that's assuming this even happens before you melt her HP into our next phase. You get back into position and keep on going and you'll speedrun through this phase like nothing. Although I could have said all of this at the beginning of the guide, it is crucial to understand how the fight works and how each attack works and how to counter them. Only then was I able to understand how to best beat this boss, which is why I make these guides in the first place, to help you all using my experience and knowledge of the game without having to go through trial and error to figure out what to do yourself. Phase 2 is not as hard as the first phase, but still tricky in its own right. There are two parts to this phase. Esther will vacuum a lot of valuables, including the player, then after vacuuming enough valuables, she will duck down and start shooting safes up into the sky, which fall down from the top of the screen. When they hit the floor, valuables will be launched towards the player. Now, this might sound like a lot, but it's honestly not that much to deal with. The key for me is to not make drastic movements and stick to the middle of the screen. Making big movements will lead you to overcorrecting your movement and running into a projectile by accident. I personally use pea shooter for the first part, and of course resist the vacuum by moving back slightly, slowly dodging everything. Make sure to use your EXs when you can, but save enough to have super by the end of this phase. For the second part, I use bombs and hover near the middle of the screen ready to react to the safes and valuables. I stay here because going too high will cause you to suddenly get hit with a safe, and not too low because then the projectile that comes out of the safe will most definitely hit you. Staying in the middle of the screen gives you enough time to move slightly to dodge the safe, and have enough time to dodge any valuables coming towards you. Also, there will always be one parryable projectile during the second part of this vacuum attack, so this is a guaranteed way of getting some parries for this fight. You rinse and repeat until you move on to the next phase. When she's moving onto her next phase, she will turn into a cooker, and right then you'll want to use your super and whetstone her 4 times before moving far back. Esther will complete her transformation into a sausage and start spitting steaks that travel in a looping pattern. She can either be on the ground or flying in the air, and the steak will home in towards you if you're not at the top while like she is, and vice versa. I typically like to hug the top and spam bombs towards her, smoke dashing or dodging the cans, beans, and steaks. When she starts going up top, use pew shooter and stay farther back. You'll need time to dodge the cans and the steak. Whenever you feel uncomfortable, try to retreat towards the middle and reposition to deal damage. If you super and whetstone Esther before this phase actually starts, this phase should only last like 10 seconds. Play it safe and you'll be fine for this phase. The last phase is where Esther really tests your confidence with your movement. She'll turn into a tin can and release 2 long chains of sausage that move up and down in a V-like shape. A shotgun spread of peppers will shoot from the center of the can, with an almost guaranteed pink pepper to parry every shotgun shot. Stay far back when she initially enters this phase, since the 2 sausage chains will launch out towards the center, and if you're in that area of the screen, you'll take damage. There will be openings on both the chains that you'll have to maneuver through to not take damage. It's really up to you at this point to move precisely and deal as much damage to the can as possible. Use smoke dashing to your advantage to dodge the peppers and possibly go through the sausage chains even. Use all of your EXs or super whenever you can, and that's all I have to say about Esther Winchester. Thank you all for watching this guide on how to best S-rank Esther Winchester. I hoped this guide helped you in some way, and if it did, I would appreciate it if you liked, subscribed, and shared this video to help out the channel. With all of that, best of luck with your S ranks.